Right now, somewhere in the world, over 8 billion people are doing something remarkable. And almost none of them know it. They are obeying time. Not nature's time, not the sun's time, but a human invention. Invisible, absolute, and barely 300 years old. Imagine a world without clocks. No alarm to wake you. No schedule to follow. No hour to be late for. For most of human history, 99% of it, this was the world. People woke when the light came. They slept when the darkness fell. And time simply flowed. So when did we stop trusting the sky? When did a small metal device on our wrist become more real than the sun above us? Tonight, we travel 10,000 years into the past to find the answer. And discover that the story of clocks is really the story of what it means to be human. Our story begins not with metal and gears, but with something far more ancient. A shadow. For thousands of years, the shadow of a stick in the ground was enough. It told farmers when to plant, priests when to pray, kings when to rule. The shadow was the first clock, and it needed no batteries. No winding, no human hands at all. Around 300 years ago, the ancient Egyptians created the first known timekeeping device, the sundial. They called the tall centerpiece a gnomon, from the Greek word meaning one who knows. It sounds almost like a poem, a stick that knows, and in a way, it did. But the sundial had a fatal flaw. What happens at night? What happens when clouds roll in? For half of every day, and every cloudy, rainy hour. The shadow disappeared, and with it, time itself. Humanity needed something that never stopped, something as relentless as time itself. The answer came from a dripping sound. Around 1400 BCE, ancient Egyptians invented the clepsydra, from the Greek, meaning water thief. A stone vessel with a small hole at its base. Water dripped through, drop by drop, hour by hour. For the first time, time could flow in the dark. Time had become liquid. In China, the water clock evolved into something breathtaking. By the 11th century, inventor Su Song built a 10-meter-tall water-powered astronomical clock tower in Kaifeng. It tracked not just hours, but the movement of planets and stars. It was part clock, part planetarium, part poem in wood and bronze. Not everyone had water towers. In medieval Europe, people measured time by burning things. A candle was carefully divided into sections. When it reached a mark, an hour had passed. King Alfred the Great of England, in the 9th century, reportedly used 6 candles, each burning exactly 4 hours, to divide his day into prayer, work, and sleep. Meanwhile, sailors discovered that sand could do what water sometimes couldn't. Sand doesn't freeze in Arctic winds. Sand doesn't evaporate in tropical heat. By the 14th century, the hourglass was standard equipment on every European ship. Captains used it to calculate their position at sea, and without it, navigation would have been impossible. The hourglass didn't just tell time, it helped humans cross oceans. In medieval Europe, the first truly public clock wasn't a clock at all. It was a bell. Church bells rang at fixed intervals, calling monks to prayer. This was revolutionary. For the first time in history, an entire community shared the same moment. The bell didn't just ring, it created society. Then, around 1300 CE, something changed everything. In the monasteries of Northern Europe, ingenious monks developed a mechanism of gears and weights, and a remarkable device called an escapement. This was the heartbeat of the modern clock, a controlled release of energy, tick by tick, that kept perfect count of the hours. The age of mechanical time had begun. Within decades, mechanical clocks appeared in the towers of cities across Europe. The clock of Wells Cathedral in England, Built in 1386, still ticks today. Over 600 years of continuous motion. These clocks changed cities. Merchants could agree on meeting times. Workers could be paid by the hour. Time had entered commerce. From the shadow of a stick in Egyptian sand, to the drip of water, to the burning of candles, to the first mechanical tick, humanity had been building toward something. Each invention was a step forward in a longer story, but the greatest chapter was still to come. The invention that would make time not just public, but personal. Not just shared, but worn on the wrist. The year is 1583. A 19-year-old student sits in the Cathedral of Pisa, bored during a long sermon. A lamp begins swinging from the ceiling. He doesn't pray. He stares, and he notices something extraordinary. The lamp takes the same amount of time to swing, whether the arc is wide or narrow. His name is Galileo Galilei, and in that moment of boredom, he discovered the key to accurate time. Galileo described the principle, but it took another genius, Dutch scientist Christian Huygens, to build the world's first pendulum clock in 1656. The result was astounding. Earlier clocks lost or gained up to 15 minutes per day. Huygens's pendulum clock was accurate to within 15 seconds per day. In one invention, time became 36 times more precise, but pendulums couldn't sail. On a rolling ship, a pendulum swings in all directions. Useless. And without accurate time at sea, sailors couldn't calculate their longitude. Ships were lost. Thousands died. Britain's Parliament offered a prize of £20,000, a fortune, to anyone who could solve the longitude problem. Enter John Harrison, a self-taught English carpenter who would spend 40 years of his life in pursuit of a perfect clock. Why does a pendulum keep such perfect time? Think of it like a ball on a string. Gravity pulls it down. Momentum carries it through. Energy is exchanged between potential and kinetic states, perfectly, without loss. Each swing is not just a movement. It's a conversation between gravity and motion. And that conversation never changes. That's why a pendulum is the most democratic timekeeper in the universe. It obeys physics, not kings. By the 1840s, something new forced time to change again. Railways. A train from London to Bristol moved faster than any horse. But Bristol's local time was 10 minutes behind London's. Trains couldn't run on schedules. Collisions happened. In 1847, British Railways adopted a single standard time. And so, for the first time, every clock in England was set to the same hour. Time had been nationalized. For most of history, clocks were furniture, large and stationary. Then came the First World War. In the trenches, soldiers couldn't pause to pull a pocket watch from their coat. They needed time on their bodies. Military commanders began strapping small watches to their wrists with leather bands. When the war ended, the habit didn't. The wristwatch wasn't just a tool. It was time made personal. Time becoming part of the body. The 20th century brought two more revolutions. In 1927, the quartz clock used the natural vibration of a crystal, 32,768 times per second, to keep time with breathtaking accuracy. Then, in 1955, the first atomic clock used the vibration of cesium atoms, 9,192,631,770 oscillations per second. It is so precise that it would only gain or lose 1 second in 300 million years. Time, finally, had been mastered. We built better and better clocks. Shadow, water, candle, pendulum, crystal, atom. Each generation pushed the boundary of precision. But as our clocks got better, something strange happened. We started to feel busier, as if by measuring time more precisely, we had less of it. The more we controlled time, the more time seemed to control us. Clocks didn't just change how we lived. They changed how we speak. Think of the phrases we use every day. Against the clock. Time flies. Don't waste a minute. Deadline. All of these come from a world shaped by timekeeping. Before clocks, no language had a word for being late. You couldn't be late to something that had no fixed time. The clock didn't just measure life. It gave language new anxieties. In the 20th century, the watch became something unexpected, a statement of identity. Swiss watchmakers like Rolex and Patek Philippe turned precision into art. A watch was no longer just a tool for telling time. It was a language. Speaking of wealth, taste, achievement, one watch could cost more than a house. Time, once shared equally by all, had become a luxury product. But not all cultures see time the same way. In many parts of Africa and Latin America, time is circular, not linear. Events happen when they're ready, not when the clock demands. Researchers call this polychronic time. Time is a shared experience, not a ruler. The Hopi people of North America have no word in their language for time as a noun. For them, time is not a thing. It is a process. It breathes. The spread of clocks was not always a gift. When European colonial powers arrived in Africa and Asia, they brought their clocks and their time. Indigenous rhythms of planting and harvesting were replaced with factory schedules. Communal gathering time was replaced with shifts. The clock became an instrument of control. To impose time on a people is to impose a culture, and sometimes a cage. Yet clocks also gave humanity some of its most beloved rituals. New Year's Eve countdown, the wedding clock tradition in China, where guests give clocks as symbols of precious time shared. The Japanese Joya no Kane, 108 temple bell tolls on New Year's night, each strike releasing one of the 108 earthly desires. Time marked becomes time sacred. In ceremony, the clock becomes a companion, not a ruler. The clock has two faces, and we must choose how to look at it. One face shows time as a taskmaster, relentless, demanding, shrinking. The other face shows time as a gift, finite, precious, worth marking with bells and candles and ceremony. Perhaps the wisest thing the clock ever taught us is this: time doesn't belong to the clock. It belongs to us. We merely borrowed the clock to remember that. Today, most of us no longer wear watches. We check time on our phones, which are themselves atomic clock synchronized, accurate to billionths of a second. We have never known time so precisely. And yet, researchers find that most people today feel more rushed, more anxious, more time-poor than any previous generation. We mastered the clock and somehow lost the day. Perhaps the greatest thing the history of clocks teaches us is not about time at all. It's about attention. Every civilization that cared to measure time, from Egypt to China, from medieval monks to Swiss watchmakers, was really asking the same question. What matters enough to count? What is worth marking? What deserves our attention? The clock is a mirror, and in it, we see our values. You are listening to this story at some hour, on some clock, in some corner of the world. And the fact that you chose to spend this hour of all possible hours, sitting quietly with history, is itself a kind of answer. You already know what matters. You are already measuring the right things. Remember the nameless Egyptian priest who carved the first sundial markings. Remember John Harrison, who gave 40 years to a perfect clock. Remember Galileo, who found a universe in a swinging lamp. Every clock you will ever glance at carries inside it, invisible, forgotten, the lifetimes of 1,000 people who thought time was worth getting right. Tonight, before you close your eyes, Perhaps ask yourself just one question. Not what did I accomplish today, but simply, was I present for any of it? Because a clock can count your hours. Only you can make them count, from a shadow in the sand, to a crystal vibrating in your pocket, to cesium atoms counting their perfect rhythm in a laboratory somewhere. Humanity built its greatest invention not from metal or gears, but from a desire, the desire to understand, the desire to not be lost. And now, at this quiet hour, you are part of that same ancient story. Sleep well. The clocks are still ticking. Somewhere, an atomic clock counts its perfect beats. Somewhere, a sundial waits patiently for tomorrow's light. And here, the only time that matters is now. Good night.